Good morning. My name is Robert Cowherd. I am number 4. Ask me later if I don't explain what that means. This is Ali Khoder.
Khoder. Ali Khoder, and I'll be co-teaching this class with Dr. Cowherd.
So I'm going to start by asking some questions. The first question is, what's the most useful thing that you learned in the 2 semesters of the history theory course? Remember that course?
Yes.
What
I see
was
some blank faces.
What was the they know. What was name one important? What is the most important thing you learned in that course? And you might express it as a principle, or you might express it as an example. Ideally, it would be a principle connected with an example. And even more usefully, there'd be an idea that is exemplified by a specific view of a piece of architecture that you studied in that course. Now I see what you're thinking. I can tell what you're thinking. You're thinking, look how big this classroom is. These guys are up front. I'm in the back row. I got this. They're never going to ask me to come up with an answer, so I don't even really have to think of one. Let's take a minute. I want you to open up a notebook or something, or a notebook, and write down the most important thing, the most useful thing that you learned in those 2 semesters of history theory.
Could actually have a blackboard exercise.
A what?
Blackboard exercise. Could have them write it on the blackboard.
Yeah, it could be like a clicker thing.
Yeah.
Okay, next year. That's the first suggestion for next year. But that means they all open their laptops, which means they all start working on their Revit models.
Yeah. Maybe on actually the blackboard itself, the chalkboard.
Oh, the analog blackboard. So when you've written something down, then you can look up. So now, either with the person next to you or the 2 people, because some rows are odd, it's hard to find someone. Now, just explain to each other what it is you chose and why. So we're going to take 2 minutes to do that. Does that make sense? Go. This reminds me that I should use the timer because it's going to take a long time. Close to total. 25. You should have 30.
Is it a required course or is it?
Yes. Where everyone registered for the concentration, the urban concentration. So now, if you haven't switched yet, now switch to the other person. So has everyone gotten a chance?
Is the history theory courses, do they deal specifically with buildings, or do they also go into the urban form?
Let's find out. That's the next question. Okay. So now let's come back. Now you've formulated it in your own mind. You've documented it for yourself in your notebooks. You have shared that as concisely and clearly as you can with one or more colleagues. Now we're going to harvest what we have very quickly in an almost musical rhythm. Just go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, like a zipper, just snaking along the rows. You're going to start with the example and then the idea. If you only have an example but not an idea, or if you only have an idea and not an example, that's okay. But example, idea. Questions about this? And you're going to get about 20 seconds each. Okay? Yes?
Can I say pass? Yeah.
You can say pass, but we're going to come back to you. No, you can. That's perfectly normal and okay, right? So you'll get a few more seconds to think of something. And you can say, oh, Susie took mine, I was going to say that. We won't believe you, but you could do that. Okay, you ready? Everybody ready? Do you know how this game is played? Okay, and go.
The Renaissance and how architects get inspired from the things built in the past.
Okay.
Mine was like the ancient Egyptian cities and how the hierarchy of it works.
Okay.
Mine is like how the architecture started more like vernacular forms and spread it all around the world.
Okay.
I think that architecture can sometimes help define the type of culture. Like how some cultures have like more like central focus on the center, and some have like a great city.
Okay. Now, so far, I want to just point out that I've yet to hear an example. Right? Renaissance is a big category. It's an idea. So if there's a concrete example, like grid and center comes close.
So we learn modern architecture.
Oh, you're not passing anymore. Great.
As an example, like Frank Gehry, and he was, like he worked as, like his works is modern architecture.
Okay. Gary, at least we have an architect. Okay.
Like advancing technologies.
Any example, like, what's,
Concrete.
what's the clear, so concrete? Okay, next?
The shift in like how things were laid out based on like developing technologies like electricity.
Okay, electricity, and its impact on urban form. Okay,
How to analyze architecture and tell what culture it comes from.
that's a method. Okay, next.
Mine's kind of similar, how to analyze architecture, figuring out by realizing what architectural elements it has to figure out what culture it's from or what part of history it's from.
Okay, next.
It's kind of like that. It's understanding the logic behind buildings and different kinds of building styles.
Okay, next.
It's also kind of like that, how architecture forms are derivative of one another, like Greek and neoclassicism or Gothic and Gothic revival.
Okay, next.
Next, alright, I enjoy the amount of trial and error that you can see within all the plans, like predating into mud huts all the way to nowadays chapels, with different
Okay.
materials and whatnot.
Okay. Next.
I was gonna say how a culture's value system shapes its urban centers.
Okay. Next.
I'm gonna say how architects are inspired by each other, and it's okay to bounce ideas from one another.
Okay, next.
My example is going back to looking at the parking lot,
Ah,
looking at something.
an example, that's so great.
And then looking at something like the Capitol Hill building that's so like old or important in our society today, and the evolution and how we build off the past.
Maybe monument.
Yeah, go ahead.
Just monument.
Jump in there. Next.
Mine is like analyzing architecture from when it first like started from culture and seeing how that evolved over time.
Okay. Culture into, okay.
Mine was more about how you're able to like mix different types of architecture, like Julia Morgan's The Hearst Castle.
Oh.
And how you're able to.
So that's an example of this kind of thing. Okay. Next.
This is kind of analysis, how you could look at the form and see it coming from history and then realize the function of the building.
Okay. It's tight.
Which is very modernist.
Yeah. Next.
Mine is sort of talking about like the unwavering, confidence of architects, like I guess like Frank Lloyd Wright in his Johnson building, like the columns he designed specifically for it. He never let the way like columns and things like designing the buildings have been done decide how he was going to do it. That project, despite them telling him that he was crazy, that they would never do it. Sure enough.
Next.
Mine is like how architecture is always striving for like new and creative ideas for new styles of architecture, but never forget their roots. All like town halls and their columns, where, they take ideas from Greek style of architecture, where it's like a sign of like power or dominance.
Okay. Next.
I also talked about taking inspiration from the past, how you can see details of Gothic style arches or entries in urban buildings or even in houses.
Next.
I had something similar, but basically like the earliest ideas of architecture of like I think it was a stupid part that went wrong. I was trying to get closer to God.
Okay.
And you can see that now with Sagrada Familia in religion.
Next.
Mine was being able to identify like the different types of architecture based on like the culture and time period you're from. Just from like the details that's in certain pieces like religion and different aspects like that.
Okay. It's, yeah, that's in here. Next.
I was thinking of kind of the ancient, like based on like your absolute necessities in like a house or building.
Say that again?
Kind of your base form of an, like what an ancient like building or house is, like the absolute necessities. And you don't have like plumbing and electricity, like what you need in a house, you know what they had. So that's all they had.
Okay. Next.
So I talked about the nature of like hierarchy and importance in terms of centrality. So like in terms of ancient cities, like the most important, most like holy place would be the center at the top of something, right? Like the hierarchy that exists there.
Right, so that's in here too, like a hierarchy
instead of
in the form, yeah. Okay. So, the next question, what was the next question you had? What did you just ask me?
Oh, how was your history and theory courses structured? Did you study specific monuments, specific elements, or was it more about, or did you touch upon the urban form of where these monuments were located? Like when you studied the Parthenon, did you study Rome as part of the Parthenon? The city, not the empire.
Study the city.
That's all.
That was a trick question, by the way.
Mm.
That was a trick question. Does anyone get it? Okay.
The city is the in the case of Rome, the city is kind of the empire because Rome controlled almost everything. But specifically, did you study, for example, how Rome grew and became what it was at specifically, let's say, the Renaissance times? Did you study that urban morphology?
Raise your hand
Some
if
people
you
say
think
yes,
yes.
some people say no. Yes.
Now raise your hand if you say no.
Okay.
So maybe not enough.
I think it's kind of like like we had to infer, because we learn about Rome, more ancient Rome, and then we would go to other topics and then come back. So the timeline was fairly linear, but there was certain jumps where you had to connect what we learned Rome and then more Rome present and make those connections. So I think you could get the overall idea, but it wasn't laid out in that kind of, as you were mentioning, the empire growing.
And have you been to Rome? Who's been to Rome? Did you guys do your study abroad yet?
No, either fall or spring, like this upcoming fall or spring.
Okay. Well, this will help. It'll help you have a better time when you do that. So it seems like it's pretty convincing from what you're saying that there is a usefulness, even if you can't pinpoint it to a specific example that really stands out for most of you as being instructive for how you do things in the studio. But it seems like you do see value in this study of history and theory the way you did it in sophomore year. Should we teach these 2 semesters that we inflicted on you sophomore year, or should we make way for more Revit or other more important, are there more important classes rather than these 2 semesters that you had in sophomore year? And I'm going to put a filter on my eyes, so I'm just going to get a sense of how many people feel this way. I'm not going to see who's saying it, right? So who agrees with the statement, these 2 semesters are valuable and we should keep teaching it in 2 semesters? Oh. Now raise your hand. These 2 courses are not as valuable as some of the other things we could be doing. Okay. Wow.
This has to be the first time that I've seen a class go stand with history and theory.
I know.
At the expense of Revit, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think during the 2 semesters, it was like personally from doing like my studio project, when I find like a precedent that applies to what I'm talking about, and then I relate that to what we learned in history and theory, like then it becomes clear to me like how the point was that we went over it. But like at the time, just kind of learning about like the broad topics and stuff, it may not have like sunk in as much. But as you use precedents in your studio projects,
Yeah, and there's also something else that seems to be happening. Despite the fact that I was asking for examples and ideas, you guys rewrote the instructions and you answered the way you wanted to answer, which ignored what I was saying. You were saying techniques, methods of understanding architecture. That makes me so happy. So there's something about the methods that you were exposed to in those 2 semesters that contributed to, well, you identified those methods as being useful for what you do in studio and what you will be doing in your careers, right? So that's very useful information for us as we launch in this new adventure. How participatory were those courses? Like, did you feel like you were engaged? How much, on a scale of 1 to 10, how engaged were you as an active agent of that course, and how much were you like a passive recipient of information flowing at you? Let's say, on a scale of 1 to 10, how many people are...
10 active participant, 1
Yeah,
passive
10
recipient.
active participant, thank you. 0, I was dead, I didn't even... 1 being, I was awake for most of it, but I don't remember a thing. So, between 0 and 5, raise your hand. So on the low end, passive. Okay, between, holding up fingers is a good idea. So, hold up the number of fingers. 6, 5, 4, 5. A lot of middle, whoa, 8, a new one, 8, 2, new lows, back row, low numbers, 5, okay. So a few 2s, a few 8s, and lots of 5e, 6es, 4e, okay. Yeah.
I came in the year before the class that I'm currently in, and I took the first history and theory class with another professor.
Who was that?
I don't want to say names.
Oh!
All I'm trying to say is that...
Wasn't me, was it?
No.
Okay.
I just want to say that for me, the participation has a lot to do with the teacher and how comfortable, one, the teacher feels with the students and the students feel with the teacher.
Mm-hmm.
And there was definitely blatant differences when it came to both attentiveness and care in the class between the two.
Okay.
If I were to make like another comment, the environment of all 90 of us and 1 professor, and your participation is, are you willing to raise your hand and answer a question in front of all your classmates versus this kind of classroom setting, like 20 or 30, I think makes a big difference. So the reason why most of us were kind of in a middle ground, if I were to guess, or why I was, because I would have maybe, like, I've raised my hand a few times, but I wouldn't be raising my hand every single time, so the interaction was more how we had the quizzes or how we had the sketches, and that was kind of the interaction rather than the actual participation, because it's a little bit intimidating to be answering those questions in front of all your peers versus in this kind of classroom setting.
So, did you do the thing where 1 day a week you had lots of people, and then another day a week you had fewer people?
For the first one.
Not for the second one?
No, second semester was just 24/7.
Which one do you like better?
The second one with the seminar.
Okay. So who wants to do the seminar model? Let's do the seminar model, right? Yeah, so that's what we're doing. Wednesdays typically will be split. My group will be in here, Ali's group will be upstairs, and we're going to be facilitating kind of a debate format where you have to, it'll be kind of a game thing where your job is to convince your colleagues to come over to your side. And you do that by presenting convincing evidence and argument based on that evidence that this is what's important. This is more important than that. And they'll be doing the same with you. And please feel free to switch sides. So it's actually going to be quite interactive on Wednesdays typically. So that's one thing, is the intention of the course. Some days we will succeed more than other days. Today is one of the days where I'm going to do a lot of talking because we have a lot of material to go through, but I want you to know that the fundamental condition of this course is that we're number 4. Right? We're not the most important source of understanding of the world. It may look that way because of the architecture of the room, right? What does this architecture tell you about what's important? Right? It's left over from a medieval model where they didn't have printing yet. The word lecture comes from the Latin lere, which means to read. And so the source of the lecture is, there's only one copy of the sacred text. I read it, you write it down, and we're done. There's no printing press, and that's where the lecture comes from. Not a great model for empowering agents of the future, which is, believe it or not, that is the only reason we're doing this. There'd better be some major payoff to all this, given how much effort and expense has been invested in this course. And it would be profoundly embarrassing if you left this experience without feeling a sense of power to identify a problem and tackle it and have some movement on that problem. And that's the whole point. And I'm very nervous, we're very nervous about being up to that challenge. If it were us, the source of all knowledge, filling you, the empty vessels, there would be no hope. Instead, I start by saying I am number 4, and I'm imposing this on my good colleague, Ali. We are number 4, and everybody else at the Institute. These instructors are not the most important source of information or the most important source of understanding. At best, we are number 4. So what is the most important source of understanding in the world? I would say your peers are number 3. But you're right, they're ahead of us. Experience of, but yes, I'm just going to say yes, experience. Experience of the world. The world itself and your experience in the world is the single most important source of understanding the world. So starting there is to help us obliterate any delusions you might have right now that you are empty vessels. You are not empty vessels awaiting to be sitting there to be filled with information from us. You are the world's foremost experts on your own life experience. Congratulations. Don't expect a certificate. Everybody's the world's foremost expert on their own life experience. But that's an excellent starting point. Is that enough? No, not even close. Anyone out there is the same level of expertise of you. So if number 1 is the world of experience, and number 4 is us, and number 3 are your colleagues, what's number 2? Why are you here accumulating a vast student debt load and 4 or 5 years of opportunity costs? What is number 2? What is the second most important source of understanding?
Like any form of media, like books or internet or knowledge.
I like family. Books and internet are closer. But you can, when you read a book, like last night, going to sleep, whatever you're doing, reading a book or whatever you do with your phones, I'll tell you what I did. I opened a book and I read it and I fell asleep. That's what I do at night. I go into passive reading mode and it puts me to sleep. It's so wonderful. But when I wake up in the morning and I drink half a pot of coffee and I pick up a book and I remind myself what's at stake today. I can't afford to be passive about it. I gotta be mad. I gotta be aggressive. I gotta be a warrior for understanding. And what do I do? Yeah.
Teach.
Well, that's part of it, because when I go through this process, and the reason I go through this process is because I learned so much from it, and I'm really grateful for the opportunity to do that. And it is an active engagement. So yes, I do teach, but what do you do? What do you do? Why are you accumulating all this debt?
Like performance communication.
Communication?
Yeah.
Yeah. So what is that? What form does that take? What do you do all day, every day?
We're communicating with others.
You're communicating with others. What do you do in this program? We learn, but are you learning passively or are you learning in a more active way? What do you do to actively explore?
Presenting.
You present. That's the second most important thing you do.
Make.
You make.
Create.
You create. I'm liking this. What do you do in that direction? More of that. In architecture.
We learn from our mistakes.
You learn from your mistakes. How do you identify your mistakes? We help as best we can. Your colleagues help as best you can. But before we critique your mistakes, before your colleagues say, why'd you do that? What are you doing to identify your mistakes?
You have to do
What are you doing?
career, school year.
We just got big again. Let's talk about what you did yesterday afternoon or Monday. What did you do in studio? What do you do in studio to identify your mistakes?
Criticize.
You criticize, what do you criticize? Drawings. So you make drawings, you make models, you make digital stuff. You look at it and you criticize it. Even before your colleagues criticize it, you criticize it. What's going on here? Are you producing understanding through this activity?
Reasoning.
Yeah, you're developing some reasoning. Like when you draw something, why do you draw it? Yes. The second most important thing you do when you draw something is to communicate it. The most important thing you do when you draw something is you are struggling to understand it. When you open up your sketchbook and you doodle something, why? Why did you open your sketchbook? Same answer. Why did
You had a thought.
you had a thought? Yeah. And what do you have to do with that thought? Why do you open your sketchbook?
You have to convey it to others. Like you have to.
Yes, absolutely. The second most important thing you do when you open your sketchbook is you document an idea or a thought so that you can convey it to others. Don't be embarrassed. We're all friends.
Oh, thank you. Whew. Front and center.
Were you in the other classroom?
Yeah, we would have lost.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
So why do we draw in our sketchbooks? Why do you draw in your sketchbook? This is a good experiment. I think I confused everyone else. You gotta help us out.
Why do I draw my?
Yeah, why do you open your sketchbook?
You know, release my thoughts, express myself.
Release their thoughts and express yourself. Yes. And what else are you doing?
I'm practicing my skills. I'm
Yeah.
being observative, taking down
Yeah.
notes and stuff.
And when there's nothing noteworthy, maybe the opposite question is useful. When do you not take out your sketchbook?
In church.
In church. Well, it's not culturally.
Sometimes you need to take out your sketchbook.
Yeah.
It can get a little.
Well, are you ever tempted to take your sketchbook out in church? So, if you see something important, we take out our sketchbooks, right? If you see something that is confusing, what do? Confusing but important. One reason to take out your sketchbook is something is very important. An even more urgent reason to take out your sketchbook is when you see something that's important and confusing. What? Ooh, that's important, but I don't really get it. So you look at it and you do stuff in your sketchbook. We do this to make sense of the world. It's warm in here, isn't it? You've been running. So, what I'm trying to tease out here is the sense that what we do in architecture, what we do in our sketchbooks, and what we do with architecture is we make sense of the world. Yes, and secondarily, we communicate things. We communicate our proposals, we pitch our ideas, we get the client to say yes. But first and foremost, we're trying to figure it out for ourselves, and documenting that process of figuring things out actually is a very powerful tool for communicating ideas. And so we sell those ideas either commercially or politically or socially. We sell, or on Facebook, we sell those ideas using these very powerful tools of communication. But first and foremost, these powerful tools of architectural communication are tools of understanding, of exploration, of making sense of a confusing, complex world. So we are taking a mess and we're trying to make sense out of what there is out there. Does that make sense? So the second most important, I did the number 4 thing. I'm number 4, just so you caught up. The second most important source of understanding in the world is architecture, the methods of architecture. The methods of architecture give us all a capacity to make sense of the world that other people don't have access to. So we look out there and we slice through it with this enormous lightsaber of our minds, and we see in the middle of Beatty, we see this 3-story sectional space. Wow. Your mother doesn't do that unless she's an architect. Right? She doesn't have that superpower. So wouldn't it be great if all this investment of money and time gave us superpowers to do things that other people are less capable of doing? That gives us a capacity to offer something to the world, to offer an understanding to the world that most non-architects don't have access to. Does that make sense? Let's push pause here. And do you have questions or pushback or comments? Does this resonate as true for your life experience of becoming an architect? You have something to add, or?
No, at this point.
Are you okay? You're going to go along with this? You're okay with this?
What we really want you to do in this course is take most of what Dr. Cowherd just explained and really look at everything in your urban context with a very critical eye. We really want you to deconstruct all of these concepts of how our cities are made, why are they made the way they're made, and what are the histories and theories that are sort of superimposed along that trajectory. And it will entail a lot of drawing, not necessarily drawing, but analyzing, visual analysis, which we will show you some examples of later on in this classroom.
Comments, questions?
I have a question.
Sure.
What are we doing in this course?
Ah, okay. So thank you. That brings us to, so what we just did now was to kind of set the stage where it may have been true in the past, in your past courses, that you're taking in a lot of information and you're being asked to internalize it and then give it back and demonstrate that you can be trusted with all this information and recall it as needed. This course, hopefully you will experience this as a bit of a pivot. Now, we are very selfishly trying to enlist you in the struggle to figure things out. For several decades, architects withdrew from the urban realm. The planners took over. This whole field of planning was invented in the early 20th century. They kind of took over responsibility for the cities. Then the planners handed it over. They said, let's look at public policy and finance and legal structures. And then they turned over the formal job of constructing the cities to real estate development, transportation planners, and just let whatever happens, happens. And so the design of cities went into a remissive, kind of withdrew from the field as architects said, hey, architecture is special, it's for the wealthiest 1%, and we can make beautiful houses. The American Institute of Architects got together and they said, we need to protect our market share. We need to make sure that we are valuable to the economy in the United States. Let's market ourselves not as experts in building things. Let's eliminate that from the curriculum, everywhere but Wentworth. We're not very good at construction management. We're not very good at planning and urban. What are we good at? What can we bring? I know. We're artists. We can bring art. And who can afford to pay for art? The wealthiest institutions and the wealthiest individuals. So we became a boutique, elitist service wing of serving the wealthiest 1%. And we withdrew from the urban scene. Our architecture schools, especially in Boston and the Northeast, got into the business of what was called critical theory, critical architecture, divorced from all economic market forces. We're just going to produce museums and artful buildings. And we created a laboratory setting in the universities, and we just talked to each other in a language that no one else could understand. And it didn't work out very well from a marketing point of view, except for the Pritzker Prize-winning superstar architects, the star architects. So, but fortunately, by a complete fluke of technological development, we have building information management, Revit, everything. All of a sudden, we're relevant again to the rest of the world, and we're experiencing a huge surge of relevance in the building industry. Whew, that was a close call. We almost went away. At the same time, there's a recognition that the world is facing some serious challenges in the 21st century that are the direct result of how we solve the problems of the 20th century. And so that's a major theme of what the lectures are going to be about, how the problems of the 20th century were solved in a specific way that created the challenges of the 21st century that you are inheriting. And if you attempt to solve the problems in the same way that were the cause of the problems, you're going to be in trouble. So you have to actually go to battle against my generation and say, listen, I'm sorry you were educated in the 20th century. Sorry to make it, I don't mean to personalize this, but you're the problem. You're the reason the world is facing these horrific problems. Please forgive us for taking a new approach. Your approach caused these problems. If we try to solve the problems with your approach from the 20th century, they're just going to get worse. Please excuse us while we try new things. And so that's kind of a basic theme of the course. The pivot here is that because of the neglect, because of this historic shift in the role of architecture in society, we're very far behind. We're several decades behind in the process of bringing architectural tools, the extremely powerful methods of architectural understanding. We're very far behind in bringing those tools to bear on the most serious problems of the 21st century. Yes?
When you're explaining this, are you explaining it as in the US only or in the world?
It started, it's most vividly true in the Northeast schools of architecture in the United States. Believe it or not, these schools have a disproportionate influence on the rest of the United States. Believe it or not, for better or worse, the United States has a disproportionate influence on architecture schools everywhere else. Evidence of that?
I, for example, got my undergrad degree in Beirut, in Lebanon, at the American University of Beirut. So it had a very sort of Americanized program, but it also had some differences. So it wasn't the same as your system, but it was the older 5-year system that used to be here in the States, I think, a couple of decades ago, and then it was changed.
The BARC.
But it exists everywhere.
And where did your teachers go to school?
They all went to school here in the Northeast. Yale, MIT, Harvard, and they came here, they got their degrees, they got that very specific kind of architectural education, and then they flew back to wherever, and now they're lecturing.
And where did your instructors go to college?
Northeast.
Same? So, so that's part of the problem that you need to overcome. And it's not going to happen if you simply sit back and passively allow us to fill you with knowledge. You need to kind of be very critical. We're trying to quickly enlist you as research assistants and collaborators in the research to help us catch up for the lost decades that we have behind us. We need the world needs, America needs, the discipline of architecture needs, the cities of the world and the Northeast need to catch up. We need a better understanding of how cities work, first of all, and we need help. We need your help to identify the opportunities where a relatively low-cost architectural scale intervention can release, almost like acupuncture, can release the energies that will crack open a problem that to the rest of the world seems impossible. You can't have public transportation that pays for itself. That's impossible. Everyone knows that. You have to heavily subsidize it. And so you have to, and you can't, it's always going to go bankrupt, so you can't increase the funding to the T that would have allowed me to get to Wentworth this morning in time to prepare for this lecture. Instead, I was stuck for 40 minutes. It's because everyone knows it's impossible, right? Or is it? Is it impossible? Or could a cross-subsidy of things like what Northeastern has done at Ruggles Station, of building high-rise dormitories and mixed-use facilities, help fund the MBTA so that the higher density at the stations will fund higher service levels at those stations so that fewer people have to drive. How many people drove today? So 4 years ago, when I asked that question of this class, I would say, how many people did not drive alone in a car today? And 4 people would raise their hands. Everybody else used to drive. So the world has dramatically shifted in a very short time frame. And part of it has to do with real solutions to very difficult problems. So moving out of passive mode into active collaborator mode, the first step, to get back to the question of what are we going to do in this class? Well, it looks a lot like, if you look at the syllabus, so let me pull this out, it looks a lot like the same old, right? There's all these readings and lectures and, oh my God, 12 pages. So we have a series of topics that are familiar from other courses on the history and theory of urbanism and cities. urban history is a thing that's been taught in architecture schools for a long, long time. So it looks very familiar. What's different about this is the first assignment that you have between today and Friday is you have a reading and you have a writing assignment. Every Wednesday, between Wednesday and Friday, every week, all semester long, you will need to read something and write something. Sorry, you're welcome. It will be painful and you will hate it until you actually appreciate what it has done for you. Because the kind of writing that you need to do, and this is a continuation of the introduction, the kind of writing we want you to do is not to just regurgitate passively back what it says in the reading. We don't want you to just give us a response the way they do in graduate programs everywhere. We want you to engage this reading very aggressively as a way of generating ideas out of the reading. So when you are writing something, when you are reading something, you are writing something as you read. You are aggressively engaging the ideas in the reading, and you are capturing the key ideas. You are ignoring the ideas that are not important. Did he say ignoring ideas that are not important? Did you just tell us to ignore part of the readings? That can't be right. That's a betrayal of what teachers are supposed to say. Wait, there's more. You need to question the reading in at least 3 ways, including critically say, that is not true. You need to connect what's in the reading with other things, and you need to extend the ideas. So this is a very specific kind of writing. And what students have told us in the past, they have said, I hate writing. Who's with me? I hate writing. It's so painful. They say, one of the reasons I went into architecture is so I would never have to write. Who's with me? Right? So what is this writing stuff? Okay? They also say, I don't know what to write. I have writer's block. I stare at the blank page. I don't know why I'm doing this other than to jump through your goddamn hoop. Why are you doing this to us? Right? Who's with me? Can we just not do this? So, and those are all, believe it or not, appropriate responses. I'm on your side. I went through it. When I was an architecture student in my junior year, I walked through the stacks of the library on a very memorable day. And here's all this economics. I don't need that. So all this sociology. I don't need that. All this history. Don't need that. And then political science, geography. I walked through every stack of the library and I celebrated all the stuff that I did not need to know. So far, so good. But then something horrible happened. I went and got interested in specific questions out there in the world. I was exposed to cities and architectures, and it was totally messed up. And I was like, what is going on here? And that's where the trouble started. I went to Cooper Union, the most hermetically sealed, white, pure, sterile laboratory of architecture that ever was. And then there was no dirt allowed in that hermetically sealed chamber. But I courageously walked out the door and went to Jakarta, Indonesia, and it was like, whoa, what is up with that? And it's by asking that question that causes all the trouble. And in the 21st century, you have to ask, what is up with that? In a better designed classroom, this would be a wall of glass and we'd all be facing the world, the number one source of understanding. And we'd say, what is up with that? What's going on here? What is that building site? What's happening with that concrete building? What is going on? in order to understand these things, these questions lead to trouble. And you need to face that trouble with courage, with the power of your tools that you're gaining through this course and others, and you need to solve some problems. So this writing that you're doing for Friday is sketch writing. And one of the things that you'll recall, that one of the things students say is, I don't know what to write. Can you tell me what to write? Well, that's why if you look on page 2, at the bottom of the page, under instructional methodologies, it says readings and a 600-word sketch writing Blackboard journal. These are very detailed instructions on how to write these assignments. First of all, you'll notice that it's called sketch writing. This is the kind of writing that you already do in your sketchbook, but longer, right? When you face something that's important and confusing, you write stuff and you sketch stuff and you say, you're working in your sketchbook to try to make sense of the world. This exercise, as described in 2 pages, probably way more than 600 words, are very specific instructions on what to do. The first step is you read this thing not in passive mode, you read it in active mode. Here's how. You know why? It's because you can't afford to waste your time reading something passively, right? First of all, you should understand that you are very busy people, right? Who's busy? Me too. I don't read anything if I don't have to. And even when I have to, I take as little time as humanly possible to get what I need out of it and forget about the rest. That's what I want you to do. First step of being effective in this process is remind yourself how little time you have, right? That said, this is a 4-credit course. The culture and system of higher education requires this 4-credit course to involve somewhere between 8 and 12 hours of work outside of the classroom, between classes. What? No one's ever said that before. The accreditation board comes here, they say, okay, cool, 4-credit course, we want to see 12 to 16 hours of work every week that comes out of that course. That's the requirement, that's the expectation. I've designed this process to take, when you get it right, 8 hours or less outside of class. Sorry, you're welcome. So first of all, remind yourself, you know that you have to do this work to jump through this hoop in your education. You might as well get the best, the most power you can out of it. Secondly, remind yourself how little time you have. Third, get a little pissed off. Harness that anger and say, I am not going to let this reading destroy my week. I'm going to go in, get what I need, and get out. And just cross it off my list. Who's with me? Okay. What do you need from this reading? Well, that's both personal, and it has to do with what comes next between Friday and Wednesday. Because there's another assignment between Friday and Wednesday that makes this one look small by comparison. So in order to be effective in your analysis work, and in order to convince your classmates that this is what's important, not that, you have to get a handle on this topic as quickly as possible. So we have these readings. You'll go in, reminding yourself that you don't have all the time in the world. You have to do this, but you're not going to let it take too much time. What do you want out of this reading? I want to get useful information that's going to help me kick butt when I do my analysis. So that won't take a lot of time, okay? So with an idea, so the first one is called Reflex City. The first topic that we're going to hear a lecture on Friday is called Reflex City. You should be saying, what's Reflex City and why should I care? What's it going to do to help me? Right? Notice I'm a little angry? That's the appropriate affectation when you're doing anything. So you'll find out what that is when you do the reading and when you come to class on Friday. So once you have a strong sense of what you want out of this, you go into the reading and you don't read it yet. You say, okay, what are the headings? What is the structure of this reading? And you very quickly, if you have a printout of the reading, you might highlight the headings. If the author is not really doing her job, you might add your own headings because clearly the author has shifted topics here, but not given us a heads up with the new heading. So give yourself a quick outline of what the structure of ideas is. Second, knowing what you're trying to get out of this, go in and identify what is important, what matters to you and us, and identify that, and ignore everything else. This is a very important thing. If you produce a sketch writing that gives everything equal importance, there is something wrong with you. Friends don't let friends give ideas equal importance. It's not all important. The author, I happen to know, the author of this first reading, he's really not that good. But it's a fresh topic. It's a fresh topic and no one's writing about it, so he's doing the best he can. Not everything he wrote in that is important to you. Whether you have permission from the instructors or the author or anybody or your parents, you have to take control. You cannot give over your life to every paragraph this guy wanted to write that one day, right? You ignore it. You ruthlessly ignore whatever is not important so you can get to the heart of the matter. And then you question, question, question. I say it 3 times because there are 3 types of questions. What does that even mean? Reflexive. What does that even mean? That's a legitimate question. I don't have time to look it up on the internet. I got to go, right? And so you just ask the question and you keep moving. If you don't have to know the answer right away, you ignore that question. You just keep going, right? You document it in your sketch writing. Second kind of question. What? That's the second kind of question. I don't believe it. I'm not convinced. The evidence is not convincing. The third type of question is, what if this approach were applied to fill in the blank, right? You're extending, you're asking a question, a what-if question. You're speculating on the possibilities. You are not passively engaging in this reading. You are actively engaging. Active is to put it softly. You are aggressively engaging in this reading. So to survive this course, you need to do these things quickly, consciously, and actively. You are creating an outline of ideas. You are paraphrasing. You're not quoting. Whenever you can avoid quoting, you're not quoting. You read 3 pages and you write 1 paragraph, capturing what those, or you read 1 paragraph that's important and you write 1 sentence that captures what's important in that paragraph. You ignore the rest. So the acronym is OPEAKS. O, outline of ideas. P, paraphrase, to capture the key ideas. I is everybody's favorite. I, what does I stand for? Ignore. Q is for question, question, question. C is for connect. Connect things that are in the reading to itself, to other things you've engaged with in this course, this school, your life experience. Connect. When it's you doing the connecting, you put it in square brackets. So to remind yourself that this is you doing this. It's not the author doing this, it's you doing this. So If you're paraphrasing an idea that's in the reading, it's the author's, you say, page 6, it's the author's. If it's the author's words, you quote it, but you should avoid the temptation to quote too much. It had better be brilliantly written if you're going to quote it. Otherwise, paraphrase it, put a page number. That tells you that that's the author's, that's a paraphrasing of the author's ideas. If it's your ideas, you put it in square brackets. If it's your questions, if it's your heading in the outline that the author didn't give you, put it in brackets, square brackets. You put your questions, you put your connections, you put your extensions in brackets. You are drawing ideas out. You're drawing understanding out of the reading. The reading is a foundation that you capture, and then you're building upon that foundation with your own understandings. It sounds like it's going to take a long, long time, right? It's described in excruciating detail in 2 or 3 pages of text. This is the result of students saying, I write better when I know exactly what each sentence is supposed to do. And that's what happens with me. Is that
Yeah.
if the sentence has a purpose, it somehow writes itself. So the reason these instructions are excruciating long is because it has proven extremely useful to have a sense of what you're doing at every moment. So you just do it, get it over with, and move on. So writing this type of sketch writing becomes more like writing a grocery list. I need bananas, I need milk, I need bread, I'm done. Right? So this is the idea behind the sketch writing thing. You're going to do it, how many times, how many topics do we have for this course? 12?
9, aside from this one.
9. We have 9.
Why do we have 12?
Sure.
Why do we have 12 legally allowed?
Oh, thank you. Typo. We've been making changes to this course up until, actually, we're still
10
making
minutes
changes.
ago.
10 minutes ago. So there are 9 sketch writing assignments. Each one is due on a Friday, at which a lecture will be given on one of the 9 topics of the course.
So that means now the minimum is 6?
Yeah, I'm going to have to revise that as a kind of.
Get to there?
Yeah. So, so questions about this assignment?
So those quotation question marks, those are part of the sketch writing 600 words.
Yes. Yeah.
So almost our notes are also.
Yeah, this either comes out of the notes you're scribbling on your photocopy in the margin, or instead of the notes you're scribbling in the margin, just turn on the speech to text and just talk as you read. Or something fast. This is not formal writing. You are not responsible for good grammar or spelling correctly. This is for you. This is sketch writing. This is writing that you would do in your sketchbook. This is you writing to yourself. We might read it. We might not read it. What we are going to do is to make sure you have a clear outline of the structure of ideas, and that means we're going to be reading some of it. We're going to make sure that you did not capture every idea in the reading. We're going to make sure that you paraphrased well. We're going to make sure that you didn't overquote. We're going to make sure you didn't write 900 words or 200 words. We're going to make sure that you are clear. These ideas are from the author. See the page numbers? These ideas are from me. See the square brackets? We're going to make sure you're doing that. It's better to structure this as an outline than it is in paragraphs. This is sketchy. It's bullet pointy. It's personal. It's you writing for yourself. It's a way of making sense of the world. This is in order to develop a habit of mind beyond what you do in the sketchbook, to kind of have you make the most of everything you engage in.
Are we refining these for our final? this is the research upon our final, or is it not
It
that?
will, things will be pulled out of this sketch writing and come into the next assignment every week, which is an analysis. You are identifying for yourself what matters most. And then your job, based on what you've identified as what matters most to you and your careers and the world, you are then taking those things and you're saying, I need to produce some visual evidence that can convince my colleagues and my instructors and the world that this is what matters. So it starts with your aggressive engagement with the reading, hopefully continues with an aggressive engagement with the lecture, and then produces a powerful piece of analysis that is convincing.
So what you're submitting on Friday is essentially related to what you're submitting on the next Wednesday. So sketch writing and then analysis. And they have to go hand in hand together.
What's the final?
The term project?
Yeah.
We will describe that in the future. It's
Is it writing?
there will be
It's-
some writing, short chunks of writing. It won't be a term paper.
It will not be a term paper.
Ali saved you from that fate. It will not be a term paper. The largest chunk of focused writing formally where it matters how you're expressing yourself, I think it boils down to a series of 1 minute, 120 word statements.
So the analysis on the, so the sketch writing is off the reading, the analysis is what we got out of it.
Hold that question, we're going to show you. So there is a connection between quality of thinking and quality of writing. So there is some connection between, if you give us gibberish in the sketch writing, it's not going to be that useful to you. So there is a connection there. At the same time, please do not treat this as formal writing. You will not impress us with your formal writing of your sketch writing. Please don't do that. It's just scary to see you invest so much time in the sketch writing. Friends don't let friends spend too much time polishing their sketch writing. If you see someone doing that, you have to intervene as number 3, right? Right? You make this commitment to each other, you won't let each other spend too much time on this assignment. The first one is going to take a hell of a long time because you're new at this. But remember what I'm saying. This should be angry, fast, get what you can out of it and get out. And put it aside. You are going to do it 9 times. If you are good performing class, as everybody so far has been in previous versions of this course, we will be dropping the lowest of these. We are not going to change our standard throughout the semester. The first one you do that's due on Friday, you're going to do really badly. You're going to get a horrible grade on it because it's new. It's the first time. If things go as planned, that grade will go away and it will never count because we want you to get calibrated of what it is we're expecting of you. So you're going to do this 9 times and you're going to get better and better and better at it until everyone in here is going to get 10 out of 10 points every time as quickly as possible. Who's with me? 10 out of 10 points as quickly as possible. Let's do that.
Do you have an example to get us started? So or is that
Boy, that is a reasonable request. Let me write that down. Okay. We have to move on now.
Yes.
Okay. So, there are 2 ways to teach this class. Chronologically, from the past to the future, or
What we're
not.
going to try to do in this class is reverse chronology. So we're going to start from the present moment. We're going to start with the concerns that we have in the world today. What are the major concerns facing our cities, our urban centers, and then we're going to move towards the past bit by bit. So we don't bore you with all the historic stuff at the beginning and it turns out to be a little too overwhelming.
So if we were to teach this is the first time I've taught this course in this way. The normal way to teach this course is to start with early human existence on the planet, moving from Africa out to the New World. Then we look at the Fertile Crescent and the invention of agriculture, which more or less corresponds with the first cities, one of which is Çatalhöyük at 7500 BC. So what just happened to you? Did you notice what just happened? It's like, I
Another history lecture.
got all relaxed. I don't know. I've heard about Çatalhöyük. They mentioned it in that sophomore first year. But maybe I'll take notes, or maybe I'll just think about, what's happening on whatever you're watching, binge watching on HBO. So this is all interesting and fascinating. But how does it help me with all this stuff of the 21st century that you just told me about? You can't introduce the course that way, Robert, and then do this, right? Because I just shut down. I don't know if you noticed. I just shut down, and now you are the source of information, and I am an empty vessel, and you're filling me, right? Friends don't let friends turn the class into that, right? It's all, I love this stuff. But we've got important stuff to deal with, right? And mainly that's you, and you guys, you young, you're going to be alive, I'm going to be long gone, but I care about the world you make for my children. So I am desperate to get you guys out there to fix stuff so that my children and their children are not devastated. So instead of starting from the past and going to the future, let's look at the 21st century. Let's look at the time scale of your careers. Who's with me? Right? Let's focus on what matters. Right? What's the biggest problem that you're going to face in your careers?
Failure.
Be more specific.
As architects and as urban designers.
And as humans.
And as humans.
Changing world.
The changing world. More specific. What are the biggest problems?
Population.
Population. Yeah. Population. Pollution.
Space.
Space. Like space?
No,
Or space.
like space.
Okay, space. What else?
Energy.
Energy. What else? There's a few more.
Time.
Time.
Climate.
Wait.
Climate.
Okay, climate. You'll explain later. Waste. What else? Anything else? There are some other things going on.
Nature life, global warming.
Natural life, global warming. This is like a popcorn popper. All of a sudden, it's like quicker. Politics. Technology. What?
Materials.
Materials. Okay, you're giving architectural answers. What about human answers? Trump?
Thank you. Thank
You had to go there.
That's a good.
What?
That's a good answer.
Disease? Nutrition? Poverty? Poverty, health, poverty, Trump, poverty, health, community, poverty. What? Taxes. Poverty. Wealth disparity.
Borders.
See, now I'm feeling better. Wealth disparity. Can we? Right? Okay. How many people are in the world now? And what was it 100 years ago? If we're 7 billion now, what was it 100 years ago? What? How much? 1 billion. It's incredible, right? 1 billion. What's it going to be 100 years from now? You have to face it.
Have to face it, yeah.
What's it gonna be 100 years from now? 15?
10 to 12.
10 to 12? You've seen this lecture.
Yeah, I know.
What's it gonna be? What does it seem like it's gonna be? If 100 years ago it was 1, and now we're at 7, and it was not a straight line, right? So what does that mean? What's it gonna be 100 years from now? If you extrapolate? 25? Yeah, if you extrapolate 25, 50 million. Billion. Right? Crazy. Terrifying. Right? The biggest problem we're facing is population, right? No. Okay. Let's do this quickly. So 10,000 years ago, human population was around 1 million. And then we had the agricultural revolution, and it shot up. You don't even see it here. Shot up to around 200 million. 200 million. Actually, there it is. There's the shoot up. You see it. 200 million. There we go. I knew it'd show up. And then, oh my God, around the Renaissance, woo! And then, oh my God. Oh my God, 1 billion people. Who's terrified? So then we move forward to 1800, and what we just did is we just did a logarithmic thing where we compressed all this time so we could see this really happen, right? So there we hit 2 billion around, what does that say? 1930. We hit 3 billion around the time I was born. 3 billion, that's a lot, given what the human species has been facing. And then what happened? The post-war boom, wealth, technology, 4 billion, 5 billion around 1990. Right? When were you born? Here we go. So this is out of order. Around 2000, we hit 6 billion, closing in on 7. And so here we go, 8 billion by 2030. And do you notice anything? Who's scared? What's happening? 2050, 9 billion. But what's happening to the curve? Oh, thank God. So this is not warfare, this is not famine, it's not zombie apocalypse, it's not old white men with buttons.
Is that based off an assumption of lack of progress?
No.
Is it land use? Is it land?
Land use is an independent, well, no, it's not an independent variable.
Like, you have so much space that people can live in the world. So would that be the point where?
So this is what is happening. We don't have time to go into why, but it's interesting to now get more specific. It has to do with women's education. That's why it's happening, basically, in a nutshell. If there was a short answer, women getting educated, which is power, which is control over fertility, which is population. No, it wasn't public policy. Only China and Singapore did anything, and it didn't work. So it's just dumb luck. But we've stayed around 1 billion in the developed world, and the less developed world is the bulk of this. And this is the fertility data. So the blue is low fertility, 1960, 1970. Red is high fertility. So this gives you a sense of where women are becoming educated and how important it is. The big question previously was what's going to happen in Asia. 50% of all humans live within that circle. So a lot depended on what was happening there, but that ship has sailed. Now a lot depends on what happens here. This is the future of the planet that will determine whether we live in a 15 billion person world or a 9 billion person world. This is the variable. And who's taking over here? China. So now, what about the distribution of things? So it's interesting to look at how these populations, well, you saw it. So now we get to cities. Let's go ahead. So when I first made those graphs, the UN had just, for the first time in 2005, compiled the historical data of population. And since then, much more talented people with technical skills have done the same thing, where you see human population moving out of Africa across Central Asia, South Asia, Southeast Asia, across the Bering Strait around 20,000 years ago, and very rapidly, watch, boom, down through the Americas. Here we are at 10,000. Around now, there's some farming starting to be developed in multiple places. And all of a sudden, whoosh, 170 million. We have to compress this scale. So here we are at year 0, 170 million. And we're off. Now we're going to start to spatialize the population. And so we're going to see dots everywhere there's a million people. So in the Americas, there's some. Europe starts to take off with the Roman Empire, the Han Dynasty here. There's a little bit of trade going through here. The fertile areas of central India. The Silk Road is starting to bring indirect connections between the Roman Empire and the Han Dynasty. But the population is still less than 200 million. This, just hold on to your hats, though. It's going to move very quickly when we get over here. So India, basically, the population, at this point of technology, the population is the basis of expansion and growth and sophistication. So agricultural innovations that are capable of supporting large populations is the basis of all wealth, specialization, and cities. Urban cultures are developed because of specialization. So every time we add a million in a center, you're going to see a little pop. And so it's going to start to pick up as we head towards the year 1000. Gunpowder was invented in China. Any questions as we go through this lull? China was the center of human civilization for thousands of years. It was a source of extreme embarrassment that they were humiliated by the military forces of the British in 1840, and now everything they are doing is in the context of restoring the proper superpower hierarchy, where China has always been number one. There was just a brief moment in history where Europe kind of dominated things. That's their perspective. So now the Mongol Empire has swept through. Not sure why they didn't take over Europe. A few cities with walls, and they turned back. European, now, all of a sudden, a few small European countries with ships, Portugal, Spain, the Netherlands, they're so small. England, they come over and they have a slave trade, and all of a sudden they're dominating, they're extracting wealth. It's no longer agriculture anymore. It's extractions of wealth, and it's going on up until this point. It's the Industrial Revolution, which was impossible until they had slavery and colonialism. Remember that. And all of a sudden, this explosive growth as the post-colonial period, lots of countries get independence, they start taking care of their own economic self-interest, and, oh my God. So here we are at the year 20, what are we saying, 50? 2100, 11 billion. We don't know. I like to say 10 billion just to round it off. So 2 babies per woman versus 5 babies per woman in 1950. That's the reason it's leveling off. It just takes a while for all those babies that were born to stop having babies themselves. So it's either going to go up like this or it's going to go down like that, depending on what happens, mostly in Africa. So it turns out the... Have you seen this? This is Hans Rosling at the TED Talk, one of the most watched TED Talks of all time. He has taken the data of economic prosperity and health statistics of the entire world and packaged it into this data visualization machine called the Gapminder. And he very dramatically shows which countries, which nation states do well. This is life expectancy. Going up in life expectancy is good. This is fertility rates. Going down in fertility is good for development. So all the countries are crowded around here in the 60s, and they are struggling to move up to this corner. So this is the brief moment of optimism. Don't get used to it.
Here we go. Can you see that? In China, they're moving against better health. They're improving their, all the green Latin American countries. They are moving towards smaller families. The yellow ones here are the Arabic countries, and they get larger families, but they, no, longer lives, but not larger families. The Africans are the green down here. They still remain here. This is India. Indonesia is moving on pretty fast. And in the 80s here, you have Bangladesh still among the African countries there, but not Bangladesh. It's a miracle that happens in the 80s. The imams start to promote family planning, and they move up into that corner, and in 90s we have the terrible HIV epidemic that takes down the life expectancy of the African countries, and all the rest of the world moves up into the corner where we have long lives and small family, and we have a completely new world.
Instant replay. There's China. There's India. There's Indonesia. There's Singapore. Okay. I'm going to end it there.
Okay.
I think. We'll do... Well, no, we're not ending it for you. It's just ending for me. So, actually, let me get back to wealth disparity. So, sorry about that. We need every minute we have available to us. Have you seen this? Who's seen this? Who has not seen this? So there's this thing that covers the United States. What social media do you guys use? Just yell it out. What? Snapchat. Facebook. Instagram. Twitter. So how many people use Snapchat? How many people use Instagram? How many people use Twitter? Not as much. How many people use Facebook? If we used social media to share things like this video, what would it be?
Facebook.
2 Facebooks? No one else is saying. It's going to be Facebook unless you say something else. Going once. Going twice. Sold. Facebook. Is there anyone here who cannot, will not be part of the private City18 Facebook group? Raise your hand. I'm an Amish. No, you don't.
I don't have Facebook.
You don't have Facebook, and you're not willing to get Facebook.
I know I'll get one.
You will.
Yeah, sure.
I forgot the password.
there's no religious objection anywhere, there's no, like, political, I will not enrich that jerk Zuckerberg, right? No one's there? So, how do I invite people to a Facebook group?
Create the group, then we add, do we have to be friends to do that?
We don't have to be friends.
Okay.
Yeah, if you just.
Oh, you already made the group. Oh, go back up. No, no.
Share?
Yeah.
Oh, no.
So I'm not going to share it with friends, but I can send a link inviting you to the group.
No, there's a members page right there.
Over here. This one. And you can
And
probably,
just on the side it says add members right there.
yeah, over here.
So I can add everybody's email?
You'll have to add their Facebook accounts.
I can add an email address.
But we made Facebook like a long
we
time
have
ago.
different
We like to do it.
We have different.
Yeah.
Who's going to be in charge of enlisting everyone?
When you copy the link, put it in an announcement in Blackboard, and we'll all go to it.
Announcement in Blackboard?
How do you join a closed group?
I don't even use that.
Oh,
Yeah, you have to be invited.
Well, I just figured out the easiest way to distribute that information. was-
Well, if I give you a link, I think you can request to join. And then anybody who's joined can then, so once you are successfully joined, please accept other people's requests to join. There is, it's not working. There is a wealth of information, not there, of interesting stuff, including these videos on wealth disparity. Like here's this one. So it's just interesting to look at this kind of stuff, and to share it. Every day there's something in the media about the topics that are at the core of this course. So we are all architects, and there's a lot of struggle with what do we owe architecture as a discipline versus when it comes in conflict with society and humans. My advice to you, and this is kind of a test, be human first, architect second, and everything should take care of it. You bring your superpowers as architects to bear on those concerns and issues and challenges that we share with normal humans. Because we are normal humans. Does that make sense? So that's the Facebook thing. Is there any other urgent business? Will you show your slides on
Show them some examples on the formal analysis for Wednesday.
Yes.
Yeah.
We, we don't want to show it now. Because they're so focused, you're so focused on sketch writing, your next challenge. Please, Robert and Ali, please don't show us how to do formal analysis things for next Wednesday. It's too much in one class. We're already a little overwhelmed, right? Who's with me? Sketch writing is going to be hard enough. Let me just focus on that. See how easy that is. It's not going to kill me. And then when I show up on Friday, not dead from the sketch writing, then we can talk about the next thing. Okay, let's just build some trust first. Questions about anything? Questions about that sketch writing assignment?
The reading's on Blackboard, right?
The reading will soon be on Blackboard. In your submission will be on Blackboard. And there's a rumor, here's one last thing. There's a rumor that it doesn't matter what you write in anything, in any assignment, the students don't read it. I don't think that's true. And I'm going to stick to that. And I'm going to assume, we're going to assume, that everything written in here is contractually binding and that you've read it and understood it, or you've asked questions. Email questions, stop me in the hall. But this is something that is required for you to deal with. So, is that good? Any questions right now about anything? So on Friday, we will all be in this room again, and then Wednesdays, we will be split.